Have you ever told the candle to be careful with its own flame? No, because nobody has ever told the candle to be careful with its flame. The candle burns because burning is what it is, and it's not because it's unaware of what burning itself costs, not because it has no sense of its own diminishment, but simply because the alternative, which is an unlit candle, which is preserved, which is untouched, which is waxy and perfect in the dark, is not preservation. That is just a different kind of ending for that candle. Instead, it's just a slower yet quieter and not giving off any sort of light or any heat kind of ending. And you yourself already know which one you should be afraid of becoming. The fear of dying before you are fully lived is one of the oldest fears a person can carry. And it's a reasonable fear. Obviously, you can't deny the fear of death. It's rooted in something real, which is the awareness that time itself is a finite resource, and that the self is a fragile thing, and that the window for becoming whoever you are going to become is narrower than it feels on an ordinary day. But something does happen to that fear in the wrong hands, and that is just the truth. What that fear does is start to curdle. It starts to turn inwards, and it stops being the thing that pushes you towards the life that you want, and instead starts being the thing that keeps you from the life that you need to become. The person who is afraid of dying unlived begins to protect themselves so carefully from the wrong kind of ending that they produce it themselves. They hold back and they wait, and then they preserve their energy and they preserve their vulnerability and their full commitment to absolutely anything, because spending those things feels like spending time, and spending time feels like you're getting closer to death, or even just feels like dying alone. The candle then sits in the drawer, unlit, intact, waxy, whatever you want to call it, preserved, ending regardless of whether or not it has the light, because that candle will come to rot, that candle will fall apart eventually. It's just whether or not the candle will emit the light. Heidegger called this being toward death, not in a morbid sense, but instead as the only honest orientation that a person can have towards their own existence. His argument was that the awareness of death, held clearly and not pushed away, of course, in a rational form, is the only thing that makes a life itself deliberate. That most people live inauthentically precisely because of the fact that they have successfully avoided the full weight of their own finitude. What they do is act as if time is an unlimited resource that they can get back whenever they want to. They defer the things that actually matter to them because the things that matter requires a sense of seriousness, and they have magnitude on their life, and that the avoidance of death makes it easy to avoid the things that have that magnitude. It makes it easy to postpone them. To live towards death, for Heidegger at least, was not to live in fear of death, but instead it was to let it sharpen everything else. It was to let the fact of the ending make the living matter in such a way that it cannot, when the ending is kept at a comfortable distance or just completely ignored. The candle does not mourn its own burning. It has no choice other than to burn or not to burn. You do. You have that choice, and that choice is the exact weight that Heidegger was pointing at. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote in his Meditations that it is not death a person should fear, but never beginning to live. What he wrote it is privately. Meditations was never actually meant to be published. He wrote with no intent of ever publishing it. A Roman emperor, simply alone with the fact of his own mortality, trying to talk himself into the life that his position made it so easy to avoid. Even one of the most powerful men at the time, maybe if not the most powerful man in the world at the time, had to remind himself, had to sit in the dark and write it down just to keep it true and just to keep it at bay. The person afraid of dying before they fully lived is not afraid of death, not really in a sense. What they are is afraid of the burning of the candle. They are afraid of what it costs to give off light and to give off heat. They are afraid of the vulnerability of being fully committed to something that could not last, that may or may not last, or may not work, or may not be enough before their time runs out eventually. And so what they do is they protect the flame, and they keep the flame small, they keep it very controlled and manageable, and keep it from consuming anything that they cannot afford to lose. But again, a small flame is still a flame regardless, and a life lived half-lived is still a life spent. Albert Camus wrote that the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free and absolutely crazy and absolutely wild and just free in a sense that your very existence is the act of rebellion that makes your life worth living. It is not comfort, nor is it the careful management of the self against the possibility of loss. All it is absolute burning, the full commitment of the flame to the dark it was made to push against. The candle will never get to choose how long it burns for, because its entire inherent nature is to burn. All it gets to choose is whether it burns or whether it doesn't. You already know which one that you have been choosing, and you already know exactly how much that answer costs you, the weight of the answer. So be honest with yourself.